Picture this. You're sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday afternoon. Maybe it's raining outside. Maybe you've got a coffee that went cold an hour ago, and you just haven't gotten around to reheating it. And you open up your investment account, and the number staring back at you has 7 digits. $1 million. You did it. And for a second, maybe 10 seconds, you feel this enormous wave of relief wash over you, like you've finally arrived somewhere, like you can exhale. And then, almost immediately, a quieter, less comfortable question creeps in. Now what? My name is Rick, and I spend probably an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, not in the obsessive stock ticker-watching way, but more in the, why does this number make me feel safe and terrified at the same time kind of way. I think about what money actually does to people, how it changes the way they sleep, the way they argue with their spouses, the way they make decisions about their careers and their kids and their futures. And I've spent a lot of time specifically thinking about what it actually means to retire on $1 million. Because I've noticed that most people either wildly overestimate what that number can do, or they completely undersell it and spend another decade working when they didn't have to. What I want to do today is pull back the curtain on what retirement with $1 million actually looks like in practice. Not in theory, not in a spreadsheet with perfect, frictionless numbers. In real life, with real expenses, real emotions, and real market behavior that doesn't care about your retirement date. By the end of this, I think you're going to walk away with a genuinely different sense of what that number means. And maybe more importantly, what questions you should actually be asking before you get there. Okay, so let's start with the thing you've probably already heard, the 4% rule. If you've spent any time in personal finance spaces, you've encountered this. The basic idea is that if you have $1 million invested, you can withdraw 4% of it per year, which works out to $40,000 annually. And statistically, your portfolio should be able to sustain that for 30 years without running dry. This came out of the Trinity study from the late 90s, and it's been sort of the foundational framework for retirement planning ever since. $40,000 a year. Sounds reasonable, right? I mean, that's a little over $3,000 a month. You can live on that. And here's where I want to pump the brakes just a little, because this is the number that gets repeated so often that people treat it like gospel, and it's not quite that simple. The 4% rule was built on historical stock and bond market returns, mostly from the mid-20th century, a period of remarkable economic growth in the United States. Whether the next 30 years will mirror those returns is genuinely an open question. Some financial researchers have started suggesting that in the current environment, with lower bond yields and more stretched stock valuations, a more conservative number, like 3% or 3.5%, might be smarter. That brings your annual income down to $30,000 or $35,000. Suddenly the math starts to feel a little tighter. And that's before we talk about taxes. If your $1 million is sitting in a traditional 401k or IRA, which is where most people's retirement savings live, every single dollar you pull out is taxed as ordinary income. So your $40,000 withdrawal becomes, after federal and potentially state taxes, something closer to $32,000 to $36,000. That's the actual number hitting your bank account. $3,000 a month, maybe 2.5. That's the reality. None of this is meant to be alarming. It's meant to be accurate. Because I've found that the people who retire most successfully are the ones who went into it with clear eyes, not rose-tinted math. Here's the thing about income that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not a fixed experience. $40,000 a year in rural Tennessee is a genuinely comfortable life. $40,000 a year in San Francisco or New York or Seattle is honestly stressful in a way that should make you reconsider your plan. I want to walk through what a realistic monthly budget looks like for a single retiree on $40,000 a year, so roughly $3,333 a month. Because I think seeing it laid out in ordinary human terms makes it real in a way that abstract percentages don't. Housing is going to eat the largest chunk. If you own your home outright, and many people who reach $1 million in investments do, you're still looking at property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A reasonable estimate for a modest home is somewhere between $600 and $1,000 a month when you average everything out. If you're renting, depending on your market, you could be looking at $1,200 to $2,000 just for rent. That alone changes the entire retirement equation. Healthcare is the other wild card, and it's a big one. If you retire before 65, before Medicare kicks in, you need private health insurance. And depending on your health, your state, and the plan you choose, that can run anywhere from $400 to $800 a month or more for a single person. Even after Medicare, you're still paying premiums for Part B and supplemental coverage, plus out-of-pocket costs that, as you age, tend to grow. Healthcare is probably the single most underestimated expense in retirement planning, and I don't think enough people sit with that discomfort before they pull the plug on their careers. Food, transportation, utilities, personal care. By the time you get through the basics, you're probably looking at $2,500 to $2,800 a month in expenses if you live somewhere modestly affordable and own your home free and clear. That leaves maybe $500 to $800 for everything else. Travel, hobbies, gifts for grandkids, the occasional dinner out. It's livable, genuinely, but it's not lavish. And if you had a vision of retirement that involved cruises and beach houses and flying to see your kids a few times a year, the math gets significantly harder at $1 million. This is the one I want people to really sit with, because I think it's the single biggest financial risk in early retirement that gets almost no airtime in casual conversation. Here's the scenario. You retire on January 1st with $1 million. Great. You start withdrawing your $40,000 a year, and then the market drops 30% in the first 2 years of your retirement. Suddenly your portfolio isn't worth $1 million anymore. It's worth $600,000, maybe $650,000, even while you've been pulling money out. And now, when the market eventually recovers, it's recovering on a much smaller base. The long-term average returns look fine,